Hey, Tasting Anarchy listeners, it's Jake, the man responsible for editing our episodes. We haven't put an episode out in a couple of weeks, and that's mostly due to my being distracted by lots of different things. I have a lot of excuses, but the reality of the situation is I got a new motorcycle and have been really distracted by riding the motorcycle around and also working on getting my license. We talk a little bit about that in an upcoming episode. But in the meantime, this episode features a review of a really fantastic Texas wine. Mason and I try the same wine. And it also has a very interesting article where Mason and I don't necessarily have a disagreement on how we would apply libertarian legal theory, but we do have a bit of a struggle between us because it brings up the issue of fraud, which is one of the areas where Mason and I do have a slight difference in opinion. So stay tuned and enjoy the episode. Tasting Anarchy, your wine and liberty podcast. Join Mason and Jake each week as they try new wines and discover how much government is in your drink. All right, Mason, how does it feel to be on the, on the air with a wine expert certified?
I bow to your knowledge now. I think it's funny, like when you were talking about getting the certification, which we'll go into shortly, kind of how we started this with like the no pretension show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm slowly becoming more and more pretentious.
Well, and that's the thing is like one of the things I think is really interesting about your wine enjoyment is a lot like Quakerism.
Yeah,
where you do most of this for you, and then you have the societal stuff that you want to do, like owning a winery and like trying to set up like a wine bar or, distribution for Texas wine, which like improves the Texas wine community, which is like a very Quaker thing to do.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to improve the community and that's going to be good.
Well,
so
yeah.
like,
and I have noticed this a lot more about myself lately in particular is how much value I put in community, but more so like I don't really feel like a strong community with like the people in my apartment. Everybody's very nice here and stuff, but like trying to get people who are interested in certain things or that have something in common together, that to me is very valuable. And
yeah, hence Childerberg.
Yeah, exactly. Hence Childerberg. But the wine certification thing, mostly because like I am very interested in. I wouldn't mind picking up some part-time work in the wine industry, just to sort of more or less like all of it is because I want better content for the show. Mm-hmm. And when I go to talk to winemakers and stuff like that, not so much the people I've spoken to because they all are very amicable, but it makes me feel more confident to be like, hey, I have this podcast and I have these certifications. Yeah, and then they're kind of like, okay, yeah, we know who this is, sort of thing.
Yeah, I didn't start this podcast 3 days ago, and then I'm calling, Robert Mongavi or something like that, going like, here's an interview about your bourbon wines.
Right, exactly.
Which,
so,
speaking of which, bourbon Chardonnay.
Yeah, that's right. Did you get one of those?
No, I didn't at the time.
Okay.
One, I didn't think I'd hear back from you as quickly as I did, and we were just in the grocery store.
Okay.
So I'm thinking that might be something we do, is because there's three of them. There's the Merlot, Chardonnay, and Cab Sauv.
Okay.
It might be worth getting all three because they're only like $14.
Yeah.
At Kroger, so probably cheaper there. Less some taxes and whatnot. And just see what they're like, because to me, like, it seems such a weird thing to like foist upon Chardonnay bourbon flavors.
Right, exactly. It is interesting, and the thing too with a bourbon oak barrel, you're going to get these bourbon flavors, but you're probably not going to get the flavors you'd get from what oak Chardonnay normally gets.
Yeah,
so
you're not getting that same like style.
Right, yeah, you're not getting the like vanilla and like clove and I guess butter, or that like the baking spices. Usually that comes from oak, and you're not going to get that from bourbon. You're just going to get bourbon. Yeah. And knowing what like a quote unquote clean Chardonnay tastes like versus like an oaked Chardonnay, which neither one of them I'm super crazy about, but or unoaked or oaked, I guess, not clean, but
well,
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think like the traditional style without oak on a Chardonnay is a little bit more refreshing. It's still not my favorite. And the oaked ones, depending on what they do with them, it's kind of like, yeah, I get what you're doing here. Neither one of them is really for me.
Yeah,
So
well, I really like butter, so
yeah. Well,
like, I really enjoy butter. So.
Well, I like that buttery flavor when it's like new oak on Cab Franc or something like that, because I think that the butter kind of goes really well with like a savoriness and the tannins. But for a Chardonnay, to me, it's just, I don't know, it's just not. Usually they're crisp and citrusy. Although, in California when it's warmer, you're going to get more, I guess, tropical fruits and stuff. But can you imagine? Well, you're allergic to pineapple, but can you imagine like?
No, I'm not allergic to pineapple.
Oh, I guess kiwi. Kiwi. That's right.
Yeah.
Can you imagine like taking a pineapple and like putting butter on it?
Having grilled pineapple?
Yeah.
And, buttering stuff to grill. Like, usually you use an oil, but you could use butter. Mm-hmm. I could see doing that. But, like, I couldn't see, like, buttering a pineapple and putting it in a sandwich. Like, without having grilled it. So.
Well, and it is definitely going to be more, I think, more like a very, very ripe pineapple or a grilled pineapple or something like that. I mean, that's what you're going to get. I mean, that's kind of one of those things that we went through in this class, was helping to identify the flavors that you're going to pick out depending on where it's from. Mm-hmm. And there's things that you and I already knew, like warmer weather tends to be fruitier, but there's also old world versus new world. Mm-hmm. Has partially to do with the heat of of it grown, but also just the terroir expresses differently in much of the old world than it does here. You can still get some of that here, but for the most part, in New World wines, you're getting a lot more upfront fruit flavor rather than mineraliness upfront.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at like where the big wine production is in the Argentina aside, but like Chile, Oregon, Washington State, California, especially like Napa, that's a lot of like really heavily coastal stuff.
Yeah. And, so you are getting a lot of coastal influence, but it's still hot.
Yeah. No, still hot. Yeah. But what I'm saying is like, if you think about interior Spain, interior France, they're not the same as interior Washington or Oregon. Like,
right, that's true. Yeah,
you're still getting that level now. Like in California, it's a little different. Like when you get over the Cascades, that sort of like positioning. But speaking of terrible transitions, like what are we, Tom and Bob?
Right.
So as I said, they had Cab Sauv, Merlot, and Chardonnay as the bourbon.
Yeah.
Well, like for me, like Carmenere,
whatever.
Tempranillo, like those are the type of wines that I would expect somebody to do bourbon barrel aging on.
I could see it on Cab Sauv.
Cab Sauv but like Cab Sauv to me like has that muted aggressiveness. Yeah, like that they tried to kind of like, because they're like Cab Franc to me like a lot of the ones I really like are very aggressive. Yeah. So to me, like, one of the things I don't like about a lot of liquors is they are aggressive. So having a bourbon barrel backing to those, to me, seems like you would want to like put it with an aggressive wine because it's a different style of aggressive. Right. So and maybe like a 2 up front punch.
Yeah, I guess, and I can kind of see that. And I mean, that's one of the things is that like a lot of the bourbon, you and I used to be really into beer. A lot of the bourbon barrel aged stouts and porters and that sort of stuff were very popular for a while. And just to me, they were always too bourbony. Yeah. Like like a little bit of bourbon, I could see that being like interesting, but it was always like, if I wanted bourbon flavor, why wouldn't I just drink a bourbon?
Yeah. And that's what like always kind of weirded me out about it. It's like, why aren't you doing that? Now, speaking of aging stuff in barrels and whatnot, I told you about this off show, and I may have mentioned it briefly on show, but O'Connor's, the big local brewery out here that's like completely indigenous. Yeah. They have a Kirk coffee stout.
Oh, okay. I think you did tell me about this.
Yeah, they do a version of it that they age on red wine barrels.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I don't think it's particularly like enhancing to the beer. Right. But it's also one of my absolute favorite beers that they do. Like the standard one by itself is very, very good. And, I'm not a coffee snob the way, you could say I'm a wine snob.
Yeah.
Like, I know a lot of varietals of wine. I generally have an idea of what you're going to see in most varietals, especially if you're like, oh, it's this, you give me a reference point. Like, I kind of, I can pick it up kind of quickly on most wines. But like coffee, like I drink espresso. I have my machine dialed into one setting. Like, I don't vary it ever. Like, I buy industrially produced coffee beans, so I don't have to dial it in, every new pound of beans or something like that. So, but I really like coffee. So to me, it's like, oh, this is perfect as it is. And then it's like, oh, we're going to put red wine barrels in it. It's like, well, what red wine? Is this Cab Sauv? Merlot?
Yeah, like what? Yeah, exactly. Is it a blend? Is it,
Is it like a really weak, non-aggressive blend? Is it a rosé and it's not actually red wine, but you're just calling it red wine because it was rosé?
Well, rosé is usually not oaked, so it probably isn't rosé.
Yeah,
I mean, it can be, but it's not usually.
Correct, but like that's the thing is like you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that would be my question is like because if they were going like, well, we took this coffee stout and we aged it on these Cab Franc barrels, or something like that, or Carmenere, where it's like a more aggressive.
Yeah, I could see it on Carmenere because then you might get, especially if it was like Chilean Carmenere, you might get some of that like the black pepper into it, and that might be interesting.
That would be awesome, especially on a coffee stout. Yeah, it's like,
or maybe like French Syrah. Then you'd get like because that's like one of the prominent flavors of French Syrah, and actually I think even Australian Syrah has a lot of this too. I don't know for sure, but is that kind of not even overwhelming, but very, very pronounced black pepper flavor. Which you'd probably like that. Yeah,
I was gonna say I might have to drink a lot more French Syrah because as I was gonna say, like you and I both really enjoy pepper. You more in the white pepper range, and me, like I absolutely love black pepper. Like, it's to me one of the best flavors of anything. So like having a black pepper in a coffee, I could see that not going well.
Right. Like, well, you could try it though and just see.
Well, now I kind of want to like grind some black pepper into my coffee tomorrow.
Speaking of coffee, we are going to be having a coffee seller on Tasting Anarchy in the near future. From Anarcho Coffee. Yeah, so he'll come on. If your schedule works out, then you'll be on as well. But if not, it'll just be me interviewing him. Yeah. And it'll be a sad interview if it's me because I drink instant coffee pretty much exclusively.
But to me, that's a market that people like Anarcho Coffee and stuff aren't taking advantage of. And
it's an interesting market. The thing is, like, American instant coffee is pretty bad. But when you get into Europe just Europe really, is you get these really high quality instant coffees that to me are not any different than like regular fresh ground coffee. And it's easier, faster, and tastes better with cream. And I put a lot of cream in my coffee.
Well, I think the next time you're here, like I would challenge you to drink a black espresso that I make. And not necessarily for the flavor, but the oils and other things that you can see in the crema, which is the head of the coffee. Yeah. It's way different.
Okay. And I'll definitely try it.
Yeah. That's one of those things about coffee is like, there's I think like Bourdain or somebody like that. It's in like, South Africa. And he goes to this guy who's like one of the premier coffee makers in the world. And he does all these crazy things and like is always testing stuff. And he's kind of like, you enjoy whatever coffee you enjoy, but I want you to enjoy coffee. And then he's like, I've got 16 coffees for you to try. And it's like the guy, and he's not insulted, but it's almost like he's expecting them to drink the entire cup. And it's like full on coffee. So
that's funny.
But yeah, that's the thing is like, I don't think Americans don't make a good instant coffee. I think the problem is the mass market instant coffee isn't good.
Yeah, Nescafe and that kind of thing. Yeah,
but
which
like
actually,
Nescafe,
I guess that's not even American. So
no, it's not. And like,
it's just what's available.
Like a lot of those European producers are actually just like Nescafe.
Yeah. The one that I get is, and we'll kind of move on from this topic, but I get the Davidoff. It's Swiss,
Mm-hmm.
or Swiss. It's and it's a common one that they drink in Ukraine. They also have one in Ukraine that's called like Nikolai, and its symbol is Tsar Nicholas.
Mm-hmm.
And and that one's pretty good too. And then there's another one called Jacobs that I got it just because it's my name, and that one's okay. But there is actually a couple of different versions of the Nescafe you can get here. You can get a decent Nescafe instant coffee here, but it's more expensive and it only comes in the small bottles.
Yeah.
If you get those big bottles of it, it tastes like burnt coffee.
Is it, so when you're saying the big bottles, is it like pre-liquid?
No. It's like a big bottle of the pellets.
I see what you meant.
Yeah.
For some reason, like maybe it's because of all the wine bottles. Bottles only contain liquid.
Right. Yeah. Well, actually, and I do like cold brew a lot. So there is actually several cold brews here that I think are very good.
Yeah.
And it may be just, I think, the bitterness in coffee. Actually, this will kind of help us circle back around to that certification. Yeah. So one of the things that we did in the certification was
first, Jacob, what is the name of the certification?
WSET. So it's wine.
Wasn't.
Yeah, it's. I gotta remember what it's pronounced or how it's. WSET program. What does it stand for? I think it's like a wine and spirit education trust. So you can get these various levels of certification in wine and liquors from this organization. It's similar to like a sommelier program, but is not focused as much on service. It's more focused on wine knowledge. So whereas like if you were to go through the sommelier programs, or I think it's called the Master Somms or something. I don't know what the sommelier program's called. You're gonna get a lot of stuff on like, this is how you pour it, this is how you present it to people, this is how you open the bottle in a particular way, and all that sort of stuff. And
I need the bottle opening course.
Yeah, me too. There is actually in WSET there is a little bit of bottle opening stuff. They do go through a little bit of service, a little bit of storage, but it's mostly things like New World versus Old World, common appellations in Europe, common appellations in the United States, common appellations in other parts of the world, how to select wines, how to know if a wine is good or bad based on the taste and appearance. And a lot of one of the things that she was saying is that you can, by doing certain things with the appearance and the aroma, you can kind of tell if it's good or bad. Because once in a while you will get a bad bottle of wine, like it wasn't stored properly or it was shipped improperly, or even things like if it's a very old wine,
bad production.
Yeah, bad production. If it's a very old wine,
I guess bad production. It happens with beer where same recipe, everything's the same, but that one keg doesn't seal correct.
Yeah, something's wrong with it. Yeah, so they go through a lot of that, and what was kind of cool about it was. They gave me advice on what I needed to study because I went for level 1, and so they went and looked. I don't get actually my certificate or anything until a month from now, but they went ahead and reviewed the test for me, and they were like, "Yeah, you missed 3 questions." So, and they said based on how your participation was in class, you need to work on food pairing because that's a big part of it. You need to work on white wines and sparkling wines. And dessert wines, fortified wines. And they said your regional knowledge is very good, and your regional knowledge for white wine was good enough, but your regional knowledge for sparklings was pretty terrible, and which is is very reflective of my taste. So she said, go ahead and we'll study up on those, sign up, just skip level 2, go straight to level 3, and you can do level 4, but level 4 requires a lot of liquor knowledge because it's a combined for level 4. So she said, if you don't really want to do that, that's fine. Because also I'm just an enthusiast, I'm not really interested I'm kind of interested in working in the industry, but for other reasons. And so she was like, if you're not going to be a server or you're not going to be doing these different things, you don't really need level 4. Level 3 is high enough. But one of the things that we did, which I thought was very valuable and something I would recommend to our listeners and to you, Mason, because although this was a little bit of an expensive class, it's a 6-hour course on a weekend, and it's fun to do. It's about $300, which is a little bit pricey, but not too bad. And And also wine is provided and food is provided. So, which is, so it's a fun thing to do on a weekend if you have a little bit of extra money to spend. But one of the things they go through when they do the tasting is the spread that they have for the like snacky foods is all stuff that is going to be flavors relating to taste in wine. And so one of the things that they had was they had food, but they also gave us all bitter strips to be able to figure out what bitter is exactly and how to identify it correctly. Because sometimes people will assign the wrong flavor to certain things, particularly when it comes to wine, because there's a lot of different flavors interacting with each other. And so what was funny is I almost vomited from this bitter strip. Like it was so bitter. But one of the things before we put it in our mouths, she said, I'm really interested to see everybody's reaction to this because not everybody tastes bitter the same way. And about 50% of the class didn't taste the strip at all.
Holy moly.
Yeah, but for me and a couple of others, it was awful. And for a couple of other people, they're like, yeah, it's bitter, but it's not too terrible. And she's like, well, the people who really taste it, they're going to have very particular taste in wine, and they're going to be able to identify bitter parts of wine very easily, and it's probably going to turn them off of those wines. But then they showed us how to pair wines with those flavors to make the bitter not so bad. And there's a whole range of things. Like one of the things they had us do was they were like, well, salmon is very umami flavor. So they were like, so taste this white wine, and you taste it, and it's, it was a Sauvignon Blanc, which is a very acidic wine. This was a French Sauvignon Blanc, so it's more acidic, and also doesn't have a lot of the fruit flavors that Sauvignon Blanc from like America and New Zealand, stuff like that has. So we tried that, and it was, palatable. It was fine. I like Sauvignon Blanc. That's one of the few whites that I think are pretty good. And then they were like, eat the salmon or eat a piece of the salmon. Then you eat the salmon, and the salmon just tastes awful with it. Like it's super fishy tasting. You don't get a lot of these other things in it. And then they said, take another sip of the wine, and the wine completely changes. Now the wine is like, all you taste in the wine is this like very sourness to it. It's got like all these other like off flavors. The fish is super enhanced. The fishiness is super enhanced in your mouth because you still have that residue. And they're like, this is because acidity in wine cuts fat. And so when the fat is cut, all of these other flavors in the fish come out. But there's a way to counter that. And she says, so add lemon juice and add salt to the salmon and take another bite. And now take a sip of the wine. And the wine, again, totally changes. Now it's more fruity. Now it's got all these like lemongrass flavors, a little bit of like barnyard aromas and tastes and stuff like that. She says, so this is why pairing wine with food is an important skill to know, is because you can have these really delicious foods and these really delicious wines, and if you put the wrong ones together, it's awful.
And here my thing is always giving somebody like a highly acidic wine general pairing, because I'm always about like stripping the raw flavor off of like stripping the fat flavor to get back to the the first bite experience.
Yeah. Well, and the fat does have, like with red wines, fat and protein play really well into it, and that is so if you have like a Pinot Noir, one of the reasons why it goes so well with cheese and with fatty dried meats is because the Pinot Noirs are a much more acidic red wine, and so you are stripping that down. And even for the more tannic acidic red wines, when you get these fats in there and you take a sip of it, it mellows out the tannins, and it kind of cancels out the acidity a little bit, and you get like a much stronger flavor of these other things going on. So like for you, who is not really the biggest fan of Pinot Noir, you don't like cheese. Cheese is one of the best things to have with it, but you don't like cheese, so you could have like salami with it. And that you eat the salami, then you drink a little bit of Pinot Noir, and maybe that'll take away some of those flavors that are overpowering to your palate that make it so that it doesn't really taste like much to you. So because different things will cancel each other out, kind of. And then you take a sip of that, and now you can, if it's Oregon, you can taste mushroom and leather and some of these red fruits that are less pronounced to you, but to me are there. And one of the reasons I like Pinot Noir. And so like a Pinot Noir with a really fatty cheese to me is delicious. But for you, cheese is not the way to go. The way to go is some sort of fatty meat that you would like a drier fatty meat or something like that. So I don't know. It was very interesting to have that experience. The other one that they did was, you know how much I hate dessert wine?
Yes.
And they said, okay, so sometimes this is counterintuitive, but sweetness with sweetness sometimes is better. And so they gave us a super, super, super sweet dessert. And they said, this is because now if you take the sweet dessert, and the dessert was fine. Like, I liked it. It was like a mango pudding kind of thing. And they were like, you take the sweetness, now your taste buds are prepared for a very high level of sweetness. Now take the dessert wine. And once you have the sweetness with the dessert wine, the dessert wine is not overpoweringly sweet and nauseating anymore. Now it tastes sort of like honey and has these other fruits in it. These, taste sort of like white flowers and like all these other things. So it was like, oh, okay, so now I can appreciate this dessert wine because I know that the issue is I pretty much only drink wine by itself. I don't really eat when I drink. And because I'm much more of a stage eater, and I think we talked about that actually in the last episode.
Yeah.
And so by being a stage eater, I don't get to appreciate the combinations of a lot of these foods and the wine. So
yeah, and
very interesting.
It's funny because like most of the stuff that people pair with wine, like the specific pairings, like the cheese plates and those other things. And I don't eat a lot of fruit. Like, I enjoy most fruits, but I generally don't eat fruit because I don't see, like, the caloric value to it.
Right.
And to me, the flavors aren't super strong anyway. So that's a very interesting kind of, like, positioning that both of us are kind of not anti-food with wine, but generally not as much. Because, I stop eating at, like, 7 p.m. my time, and then... like we do the show at like 8 p.m. my time. So like I don't eat anything while we're, like I don't mute my mic and eat something or anything like that.
Yeah.
And in fact, the wine's breaking my fast as it is. So
right
now,
well, let's go
all
to
of that. I was going to say all of that fun. We are drinking a wine tonight that you gifted me from one of the wineries that we toured, or not toured, but attended while I was driving the wine van for Childeberg.
Yes. Yep. So it is the Torr Lochs Tempranillo 2014. This particular vintage is no longer available. These bottles were among the last ones available. So you and I have the last in my stock was the one that I gave you, and the last, and this is the last one that I'm drinking right now. 13.9% alcohol by volume. It's now. The winery itself is in Hill Country in Texas, very close to Lake Buchanan. If you guys have a chance to go out there, I recommend it. I know that you and some of the attendees were not super pleased with the service. I didn't happen to notice, but I also am much more tolerant of mediocre service than most people.
And here's the thing, that the difference was I wasn't drinking. So if I had been drinking and we hadn't been in a... You know me, like, if I plan an event and anything goes off on the event, like, I feel like I'm putting someone out.
Okay, right.
And so to me, like, we were trying to go to 3 wineries. We advertised that we were going to go to 3 wineries. Not that anybody who was in the wine van really minded the fact that we weren't able to make the other winery.
Yeah.
But, like, Torr Lochs, like, the service wasn't great. And that frustrated me because, like, the only thing I could compare was the service. Because I wasn't drinking... They didn't have any food that wasn't heavily cheesed. So, like, I'm just sitting there kind of going, like, okay.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying people's conversation, but, when you kind of get to that point where everybody else has had a few drinks or is talking about the wine, and you're kind of going, like, I like orange.
Well, and I think that is very difficult.
But they also had 2 dogs. That was really cool.
Those were cool dogs. Yeah, yes. One of them had like one of those neck things on it too. Like
I thought both of them did. Technically.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Yeah, I think they both had like electronic collars.
Yeah,
and it was interesting because like the winery drive-in, like you're not supposed to get out of the car because they do have animals on the property.
Yeah.
And the view in the like for seeing the different side of Texas, and I mean the wineries aren't that far apart. Like. It is a completely different looking place, and it was very, very beautiful location. And that was kind of the thing. The other part of it was like we sat inside, which made complete sense for what we were doing. But like had it been you, Victoria, and I, we probably would have sat out on the patio.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then if service was slow there, it's kind of like, okay, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, because it was very pretty, and yeah, I noticed a lot of our group wanted to sit inside. It was hot, but like we went to a really good Middle Eastern restaurant the other day, and it was hot, but we sat out on the patio because Victoria wanted hookah, and I actually like it when it's like that. Like I don't mind sweating. It's not bad to me. I know it's very uncomfortable for other people, but it's fine to me.
I don't mind sweating. I just don't like it because like at a certain point I know my deodorant runs out.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
And then it's just like, okay, now I don't smell good and I'm not noticing it. But if everyone else is going like, oh man, he stinks.
Well, let's talk about something that smells good. And that is this Texas High Plains Tempranillo from Torr and Lochs. Like I said, vintage 2014. It's 13.9% alcohol by volume. Texas High Plains source grapes. They do have a vineyard on site, but the vineyard, I believe, was planted in 2014, so it's not producing a lot. So the only way to get estate-grown vineyard wines is to join their wine club. Mm-hmm. And for some people, that may be worth it. For me, because of how much I want to drink from various places, it's not always a good idea for me to get a wine club from one place.
Now, if somebody wants to sponsor Torr and Lochs wine club for Jacob...
Oh, I would totally take that. Yeah. Because I would definitely be buying a lot of that. So I'm going to go ahead and give my notes on this, Mason. I know this is one thing that I'm trying to get better at because it's something I used to do. So the look, to me, nice red plum color. It's I guess this is what they call medium garnet. I try not to use those fancy terms because I don't know what a garnet is. I kind of have an idea. I looked up the rock.
It's the January birthstone.
Yeah, that's okay. Oh, is it okay? So I looked it up just to see, and I was like, yeah, I guess that's pretty close. One thing that I also learned about, and this is not necessarily a good or a bad thing, but was to check for residue from the wine bottle because it could either indicate that you opened it wrong, it could indicate age, it could also indicate faults in the wine. So no residue in the wine.
We knew about the faults part.
We did know about that, yeah. Now, granted, a lot of times when I get, is it Grenache or Grenache, or is it the same thing?
Well, I think there's two, and I'm not sure which one you're thinking of.
Okay. Well, sometimes I have been drinking a lot of those lately, and it seems like every single bottle has some sort of like residue in it.
I think a lot of the foreign ones are going to.
They're all Spanish. Yeah, they're all Spanish.
I don't know if that's a shipping process issue or... And it's mainly reds that I noticed this. Yeah. But that's because they're also fermented with the stuff, in there. So I think it's probably like a function of transferring from the cask or wherever it's being aged in. Yeah. There's probably some agitation that gets to the bottle.
Right. Now, this is something else I learned from this class is that you can kind of tell if it has a garnet or a red color, it's probably a relatively young wine. The older it gets, the more brown it's going to get. So you are going to end up having more of a brick color, like kind of a brown bricky looking color if it's older. So this is a relatively young wine. Even though it's 2014 for a red, that's fairly young.
Well, for a Tempranillo, I don't know if that's necessarily super young.
Well, I don't know. They're high. They're relatively high acidity and relatively high tannins, so they do age well. And this one, it hasn't been aging for a long time, but that's fine. It's very drinkable. So. No staining on the glass, which means that it is got a slightly lighter skinned grape. But one of the things that I know about Tempranillo, it's going to be, it is a very dark grape, so it could also indicate thinner skins. I don't know, these are things that I learned that I think are interesting. I'm not going to really get too much into those in the show because they're things that for the audience that I think you and I are trying to cultivate, I don't want to get like too cerebral about it. So. Yeah. The legs form quickly, which you and I have talked about several times, which are those kind of like lines of wine running down, which means it's either low sugar or high alcohol.
As you sip the wine.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I said in my notes, there we go. So the smell, I get blackberry and like a very light vanilla. What do you get from it, Mason?
Alcohol.
Alcohol? Really?
Yeah. So I don't know if my bottle is off. So this afternoon, I opened the bottle at 1:30 or so. I poured in like the smallest amount of wine I normally drink as a glass. Right. So like, we used to do the show out of glasses that I owned. Yeah. So I used to, we would do very full glasses because we would drink an entire bottle, split between the two of us. So the first glass I had, both my wife and I thought it tasted a bit and smelled a bit like Concord grape juice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was a little disappointed because I knew this was a wine you were a very big fan of. And this is not Tempranillo to me at the time.
Okay.
Then about dinner time, so about 5:30, I poured an even larger glass and let it sit for not very long. And I hadn't let the other one sit very long, and I didn't do a lot to aerate it while it was in the glass. But it had significantly improved.
Okay.
The glass I have here, which is the third glass, was near the top of my glass range now when I'm not going like, I'm going to get drunk.
Right.
And I have had it out for about an hour. So I may have had it open too long at this point. Plus, my sense of smell isn't always the greatest.
Yeah.
Now, the second glass, my wife had a sip of it during dinner, and she said it was, it dried out her mouth a lot. She said that about the first glass, but for me personally, the first glass didn't.
Okay.
But that may have just been the time of the day.
Okay.
So, this is one of those ones where I know how much you like Texas Tempranillo.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that this vintage is not a good representation, but the bottle seems a little weak in that representation to me.
Okay, that's interesting.
But
okay.
I haven't had as many, I drink a really cheap Tempranillo. So this might be one of those, this is just a better one, and it's kind of more like Pinot Noir, where there's a lot going on, and I'm not getting it.
Okay, well,
whereas the other one, the one I usually like is very aggressive. But you know me, I like aggressive wine.
That's true. Yeah, it's El Pensador is the one you normally get. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me go then into the taste and mouthfeel with it that I get from this, and we'll see if any of it lines up with you. So I get very ripe black fruit. I get smooth tannins, so it doesn't really dry my mouth out that much.
It's drying my mouth out more now.
Okay.
But I also haven't had anything else to drink. I usually have some water to sip on. But I hadn't sipped on any water in over an hour and a half at this point. So that will usually dry my mouth a little bit. But yeah, very smooth. This is very smooth. That's very nice about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say medium to heavy mouthfeel. So on the heavier side, but not super, super full bodied.
Would you almost say silky, kind of on the back?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, like a little bit. It's in a little bit lighter than, like a real heavy Cab Sauv or something like that. But it is heavier than like a white wine, for example, or a Pinot Noir.
But it's not viscous in
right.
the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
You can get a Gewürztraminer.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't coat the tongue with that sugar.
Yeah. Because
obviously, it's a red, so there's a lot of sugar in it.
And then I would say for the next one, it's hot. So it does, the alcohol is very present. And I feel that anyways.
My wife said that on the first one and a little bit on the second glass. Because I drink, last night I had 120 minutes. So, like 19%.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I don't think it's that hot on the alcohol.
Okay.
I was a little disappointed because, again, I was expecting this to be much more aggressive, being Texas and heat, thinking like this is going to be a really aggressive Tempranillo. I am pleasantly surprised it's not in its own way. But I was thinking like, oh, this wasn't really, blah, blah, blah. But I am kind of tired.
Okay.
We did a bunch of stuff today. So, but I'm kind of feeling it. So I'm not sure if it's actually is hot.
Right.
And I'm just not cognizant enough. So I'm looking forward to tomorrow finishing the bottle.
Okay. So then
I left enough for tomorrow.
Oh, that's good. So then I said nice acidity and long finish. But it's not very acidic, but it's a nice level of acidity, I think.
Yeah. So I get generic red fruit trending toward plum. I could see like a blackberry more being that way. But again, you have a very strong blackberry flavor from Vachon.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That I'm very jealous of. And your taste memory is a lot stronger than mine for those things. And again, as I said earlier, I don't eat a huge amount of fruit. Not that you necessarily do, but like a lot of the fruit I have is in yogurt, and I eat the Icelandic yogurt that has very low sugar, and it's usually pretty acidic.
The skyr, is it skyr or scree? Skyr,
yeah. I mean, like I always call it Sky R, but just because I like to put an I in there when there's a Y. But so that's where like this is one of those ones where it's not that I don't think it's a good bottle of wine, but I think when you say it's young, one of the things I think is young about it is I think the production is young.
Okay.
So I don't know how long they've been producing this as a winery.
Not long. This is probably one of their first vintages, maybe their second vintage.
Yeah. So I think a lot of the youngness comes from the actual production.
Okay.
And I think there's like probably some sulfate kind of, I don't know if they sulfated it.
They probably did. I mean, that's pretty common in wine because it doesn't really keep otherwise, but I wouldn't say they put too much sulfate in it.
No. I was thinking they didn't put enough.
Oh, okay.
To try to, because one of the things is like, kind of fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
To me, this is a very, like, and I'm not saying that Lochs doesn't have somebody who's of this quality.
Yeah.
But this seems like somebody who went, no, I know exactly what I want to make. And this is probably exactly what they were trying to do. But to me, it's too young. And that might be just where, because I'm kind of possibly getting out of my red kick and getting back more towards some whites. And, one of the things I've been taking from a lot of the reds is like the upfront and the aggression in a lot of the reds that I like. So like, Noir or Grigio, where it's like heavily acidic. So I'm probably going to be swinging back into a lot of those where it's kind of fighting you to get past it's like sours. Like once you get past the sourness in sour beer, to me, it's amazing.
Right.
And I think you're with me with that, where it's like, yeah, we really like that. But like my wife can't ever get past it. She's just like, no, this isn't good. And she likes sour stuff. So
well, I'm considering next week doing a Viognier. So, but maybe we'll get back. We'll kind of circle back on that. Let me do the conclusion.
Do you have a McPherson?
I don't have a McPherson, but do you?
I still have the one you sent me.
Oh, really? I could go get that actually.
I was thinking, because I'm trying to decide, because I was thinking about aging that one.
Yeah.
Until you came out.
Well, okay. Well, we could do that. Like, I mean, whites aren't really designed to age unless.
Well, no, I mean, like, I'm not talking like a year. Like, if you're not going to come out in a year.
No, I will. I'll probably be out. In not too long. So that might be a good one for us to do.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought. Was like maybe we could get a Virginia.
Yeah. And
then I'd have a Texas here already.
Oh, that'd be kind of cool. Okay.
But I also have another Lochs, and then if we can, depending on what's going on with Bird and getting him that one, we'll figure it out. But
that's on the way to him. He should get it Wednesday. Good. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me go and do my conclusion on this, and then we'll move into the articles because we're already like 40 minutes in. So so my conclusion on this, which is very different than your conclusion, which is one of the cool things about wine is that it is super subjective. And I kind of like it when you and I have a different opinion on wine, because it's interesting to see how very different our tastes are in wine. So this is what I said for it. I said, I think Texas does Tempranillo very well, and I think this is a very good representation. This is not overwhelming and very accessible as far as flavor goes. I think it really goes well with Texas style barbecue or like a steak or something like that, but would probably go well with any sort of fatty protein because it does have the acidity. Yeah, so
I think it's very accessible. I think, to me, one of the things that this is something I notice about you.
Yeah.
You were never super into being from Virginia.
Right.
But you're super into being from California, and now you're super into, in my opinion, and not necessarily through overt things you said, but being a Texan.
Well, I don't really consider myself a Texan, but I do like Texas a lot. I still think of myself as a Californian.
Yeah, but that's my kind of thought is like, in 2 years, I think you'll be like, no, I'm a Texan.
Maybe. We'll see.
Because how you've fallen into the Texas wine scene.
But we'll see. We'll see, because we're both, Victoria and I are talking about, like, depending on how our business plans go, we may not even live in the United States in a couple of years. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So that's where, to me, like, this is one of those ones where I think, like, it's kind of you putting that Texas foot forward personally.
Yeah.
But
well, that's very true, because, one of the things that about wine in general is not wine in general, any sort of beverage or food, well, food probably to a lesser extent, but any sort of beverage that is a story really does make it different. Mm-hmm. And so with Torr and Lochs, the flavors that I get out of this do remind me a lot of Vashon, and particularly that blackberry flavor. It's got that. I have a very, very strong sense memory. And so when I taste certain flavors in things that remind me of somewhere that I love, I like that wine a lot more. And then there's the story aspect to it as well, which is I do like Texas. I like the Torr and Lochs story. The people who started it are very interesting. They chose a beautiful location, but a difficult location to plant in. Very, very rocky, very not a lot of water up there, and it's not an easy place to grow. So, like, that story is also very good. And then just the general story of Texas wine. To me, there is good stuff growing here. Now, would I put Torr and Lochs Tempranillo at the very, very top? I wouldn't. I have had much better Tempranillos, and you can go back and listen to some of our back episodes for the ones that I've reviewed. But it is one of my favorites at the price point, and it's very accessible, I think. And it's a good introduction, I think, to people who maybe haven't had Tempranillo or who enjoy Tempranillo and like the New World fruitier Tempranillos like this. So one thing I would warn, though, about pairing it with barbecue is I know a lot of people consider, and I'm this way too, is that barbecue is got a lot of like sugary sauce on it or a lot of vinegary sauce on it. I don't think this would go great with either one of those, but the kind of the drier barbecue, like brisket without the sauce and that sort of stuff, I think this would go much better with that.
Yeah.
And then I guess the conclusion. Oh, I wrote down here because so one of the other things that they tell you is what grows together goes together, right? So if you have a grape varietal that is from Spain, which is Tempranillo, known for Rioja, known for Toro, those types of areas, you're one of the cuisines that they have there that goes very well, particularly if you're like a vegetarian. I guess this wouldn't be great for vegan, but would be buttered vegetables. So buttered and roasted vegetables. So if you roast and butter vegetables, this would go very well with that. It would also go with fattier Mexican food that is less spicy. So that's my conclusion.
Yeah, I think spicy food, though, because, like, to me, I think spicy, non-fatty foods.
See, I mean, the thing is, and this may be good for you, but if you have a spicy food and a acidic wine, you're going to have a very high intensity in the spiciness.
Yeah, well,
and if you like that, that's great. Like, but that's what acidity is going to do. Is going to increase the spiciness. But you know what? Then again, if it's a spicy and very salty food, that also might be very good as well. So really, to each his own. I don't think a spicy food would go great with this, but for Mason, who has a very different palate than I do, this would probably go great with something spicy, Mason, that you normally make. Maybe like Indian food or something.
Probably. I think Indian food would be good.
I like Indian food pretty much all the time. So, and especially that vindaloo that I make that's like ungodly spicy.
Yeah.
Okay, I got two articles for us this week, Mason.
Okay.
One is just kind of like a fun article, and it's a history find. It's really quick. Do you want to do that one first?
Yeah.
Okay. So the title of this is Ancient Celts in Burgundy Drank Greek Wine, Study Suggests. It's by Chris Mercer, who we have read many articles from Chris Mercer. He writes for Decanter. And he is one of my favorite journalists who writes for Decanter because he is very factual. There's no like twisting of the facts or anything like that. He just is like literally reporting what people said. Like it's like, so-and-so said this, so-and-so said that. So, anyways, I'll summarize the article real quick. Mason, you may want to comment it or you may not. It's really a very short article. I just thought it was interesting, so I thought we'd include it today. So, new study testing fragments from Celtic settlement in what is now Burgundy suggests Celts were drinking wine 1,000 years earlier than previously thought. The pottery discovered at the site shows signs of having contained wine. So this is, I guess, a staining that is in the wine vessels. And then they said there is no evidence that locals were producing wine from either vineyards or from wild grapes. So they don't believe that they were producing their own wine. It is believed that since they were importing pottery from Greece, that it is likely that wine was in the pottery from Greece, or they were also importing wine in different pottery from Greece. So many of the pots also showed signs of beeswax. So it appears that the Celts were either reusing the pots to make mead, or they were mixing honey with the wine to make it sweeter. Mm-hmm. So it's just an interesting, they could have either been doing one of those two things. Many of the pots also, I'm sorry, I already read that part. So they either enjoyed honey or they were drinking or they were making mead. There's also a lot of evidence of beer making on the site. So it seems that they were not only drinking wine, they were not importing just wine. They also made beer locally and possibly made mead locally and were importing wine from Greece. And they know that they were importing stuff from Greeks or Greek settlements. Also, it could have been, Sicily or these other places where the Greeks had settled and were growing wine. But they know that they were importing stuff from the Greeks because there is a lot of Greek pottery there, which is painted and has the different Greek stories and stuff like that on the pottery. So just an interesting article. You got any comment on that?
Yeah. So like they're saying that they were importing the pots and things like that. So this is one of those ones where it's not that I question the science, but it's like, oh, we knew they were doing this, importing pottery from Greece. And now we think they were bringing wine in. It's like, so how do you know they weren't just reusing the wine pots?
Well, that's interesting. That's one of the thoughts I had as well, was what makes them think that the Greeks weren't just selling them used pots.
Yeah. And like they bought the pot because like they could use the, they drank the wine and then use the pot. But like that to me is like, if there's evidence of them using Greek pottery beforehand, like, to me, it would seem like if they were heavily importing Greek wine, there would also be, like, evidence of that. So, it's just one of those, like, are they making the right assumptions? How do you know it wasn't a one-time import or, some weird thing?
Yeah, and I'd be curious to see if they go back, because they were also saying with the mead that the beeswax was in 50% of all the pottery they've found so far. So like that is an indication that they were either eating a lot of honey or drinking a lot of mead or making a lot of mead. And now mead is a very easy drink to make. To make good mead, it's a little more difficult, but really you're just, you're fermenting honey and putting maybe spices and stuff like that in it as well. And same thing with beer. Beer is not terribly difficult. Wine is also not terribly difficult, but a lot can go wrong, and you only have really one chance a year to make it. So it's kind of a different process. So it's interesting. I would be curious for them to continue looking. They cited certain items that they didn't find, which is why they believe they were not making their own wine. So I guess there's some sort of like tool that they've found in many civilizations that were using wild grapes to make wine. But who knows exactly? I mean, this is the thing with archaeology in general, is that they do get things wrong and it takes them a very long time to correct it. I thought this was very interesting because I'm Celtic by heritage, and one thing that people forget is that most of Western Europe was Celtic until kind of the Romans showed up and then the barbarian invasions, and the Celts are kind of pushed out into the British Isles. But there's still Celtic people in Basque Country, for example, in Brittany, in parts of the Netherlands and stuff like that. So it's a slightly different culture. I mean, in this day and age, it's been homogenized quite a bit, but I mean the Basque are still very different people. And although they think they may be pre-Celtic, they may be even older than that, but they don't know for sure. But that's one of the cool things about genetic testing. Like I know I just saw another article on Decanter that they were talking about how they've been doing now a lot of genetic studies with wine grapes. And I guess they were able to determine based on DNA recovered from grapes that were like left over in some archaeological site from 900 years ago that I want to say it was Syrah, but I don't know which one for sure, that they thought it was a relatively new grape, but it's actually been cultivated for 900 years.
At least.
Yeah, and they were like, whoops, I guess we were wrong about that. And okay, well, let's go ahead and get into our more tasting anarchy centric article. This is much more government related. The article is from Wine Enthusiast, which is, I don't know if I told you, Mason, I subscribe to Wine Enthusiast now. So there's a print edition and a digital edition. I have the print edition, which does give me limited access to the digital edition as well. But I pulled this off of theirs, and this is actually free. So it's called Bordeaux Court Convicts Wine Merchant of Fraud. It's by Suzanne, I would say Mustachici. Yeah, I'm not sure how to say that. But
Mustachich.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and summarize the article. So Court in Bordeaux convicts wine negociant Vincent Lastaste. I'm not sure how to say that either. L-A-S. It does look like Last Taste. L-A-S-T-A-S-T-E.
Yeah.
They've convicted him of fraud concerning more than 10,000 cases of wine. I'm just going to call him Vincent. Vincent ran the Negociant Sequoia. So Sequoia. So the sentence was 6 months in prison, 30,000 euro fine, and the company Sequoia was fined 150,000 euros. It was fined 150,000 euros. So the judge said this was a quote-unquote serious misuse of appellation. Mm-hmm. The trial was over the cellars owned by Sequoia in Cadillac, which is a region of Bordeaux. The case stated when high levels of, the case started when high levels of sulfur were detected in wines destined for China. Once they detected those levels, they started an audit to see what was going on with their wines because they said it was unusual. So what they found was wines were fraudulently labeled with appellations like Gravaz and Côte de Bourg, or Côte de Bois. I'm not sure how to say that one either.
I think Côte de Bois is the right one.
Okay. The wine was cut with water, and also blends contained wine from multiple regions. So just to kind of remind everybody, a negociant is not somebody who makes wine or grows grapes. They purchase wine from winemakers, or they purchase juice, and they will blend that into new wines, and then they will sell that. This is a common practice in France, but there are negociants here in Texas even that will purchase wine from different places that have not been bottled yet, and they will blend it and make basically a concoction that is what they're looking for. So it's kind of like, somebody buying paint after the fact and trying to paint a picture. So so I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just it's a different thing going on. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to call him Vincent because I don't want to try to read his name again. But Vincent has been named in other fraud claims and he received in that other fraud claim a suspended 18 months. Vincent now lives in the United States. He wrote to Wine Spectator, and he says that he is not avoiding the French justice system, but he is trying to get a fresh start in the United States because his name has been tarnished by the French justice system. He says he wrote a letter to them, and he said that if you talk to his staff, he never asked them to do any of these things. The mislabeling was probably just a mistake, and the water that they found, he said, was due to recently cleaned filters, because it was not a very high level water, but it was a little bit, and that the other stuff was just paper errors, basically. People mislabeling things, things getting switched around, and just accidents. Mm-hmm. So, very, very harsh sentence, and but this is a very important thing, and I think a really interesting issue that you and I can talk about, Mason, because it is kind of a libertarian issue, but it's sort of a weird area. Because the appellation system in France as well as the United States is a government system. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say it's quasi-government because it is ultimately enforced by the government, but it is a traditional system in Europe. So now, just because it's traditional doesn't mean that it's not government-based. I think a lot of this was originally established from charters from various kings and things like that. So I'm kind of two minds of this. On the one hand, he's been convicted, so we're going to assume that he's guilty. He did commit fraud, but on the other hand, it's fraud against a system that is enforced by an illegitimate power. Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting to me. Now, I think I would be pretty irritated if I bought a wine that wasn't very good, that I thought was from, Côte de Bourg or Côte de Bois, I think it is. Those can be very expensive wines. So if I bought one from this negociant and it was not what I thought I was getting, I would be pretty pissed.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, what is Côte de Bois? Like it's sort of like, now it's more established in Europe, but it's sort of like if there was like fraud between Texas High Plains and Texas Hill Country. Yeah, there is a difference. The terroir is very different and all that sort of stuff, but it's not established. It's so like, ultimately, like, what's the difference? But, what do you think?
So this is one of those things where fraud is one of those things where, like, I have a hard time accepting the concept a lot of the times. Mm-hmm. Because, like, okay, you're saying that I've fraudulently filled out your paperwork. Well, what proof did they have that there was like in Fukushima?
Yeah.
There is evidence that's real evidence that no one's disputing that they systematically said, we did this to protect people and then didn't actually do it.
Right.
Like, or where they were told, hey, we're saying these are safe, but they weren't because they didn't move the generators to higher ground. And they knew that area could have been hit by tsunami.
Right.
So there's a certain level of, like, fraud there that it's evident. Like, and this is, it's a court case and who knows what, we can't read French. So,
right.
Like, Ashley and I were talking about this last night about the Title IX rollbacks because basically it was becoming a system of he said, she said, basically ruin somebody's life and hold them in like a kangaroo court.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know what he's saying. Like, you talk to my staff, I didn't tell them to do this.
Right. So, well, that's in the article. He wrote a letter specifically to Wine Spectator about this. Mm-hmm. And in his letter, he says, if you look at the transcripts, you can see that my staff and also the I can't pronounce this word either, but it's hold on, let me look through it real quick. How do you say it's I'll put it in the chat real quick, or on the document. It's an enologist.
I don't think I've ever seen that word. I would say enologist.
Yeah. So
ENOLOGIST.
Let's look up what that means. I probably should have looked it up beforehand. So an enologist is the science and study of wine. Okay.
Yeah.
So apparently that his head enologist testified in court. He was like, no, he never told us to do any of these things. They're mistakes.
Yeah. So
we'll see.
Thing. A mistake doesn't necessarily alleviate you from responsibility.
Right.
It was a mistake that I dropped a 4,000-ton weight off the Empire State Building.
Right.
That doesn't relieve me from the people I killed when it smashed into the ground or the property damage I did.
Yeah.
It was a mistake. So, if you make a mistake and you figure it out, like if he had come out and said, no, we traced it back, these 6 bottles of wine, these 1,600 cases made it to, China.
Right.
We've issued refunds and we are instructing the Chinese to recall it as best we can.
Right.
Like, okay, like, you know, there's the idea of, like, you know, in an anarchist system, your reputation is the only thing that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, like, did he commit fraud? Maybe they intentionally tried to do this.
Right.
But, like, you know, like the high levels of sulfur, okay, that could be dangerous. That could also ruin the product. And, you know, depending on the long arm of the French law, it may break, you know, the Chinese may not have any recourse to, like, get back at him to, you know, sue him or anything like that, because you know how France is so protective about weird stuff, like,
right,
you know, workers and stuff. So, you know, they may not have any recourse in the French courts, and, like, you know, the Chinese courts, who knows? So, like, there may be no recourse to those sellers, but, like, oh, there was content from different appellations in the bottles. Who cares?
Right.
Like, you know, oh, it was mislabeling, it was misfilling. We're trying something different. There's a label on it. Well, like, how much of that was placed in a docket for actual sale?
Right. Yeah,
like,
and that's a good question, because, you know, it was discovered en route to China. So
yeah.
it may be that none of this was actually sold. It's just a violation of some sort of statute.
Oh, but it was en route to China. Okay, there's a little bit of a difference there.
Right.
Like, I wasn't exactly sure how much the 10,000, you know, like, where they stood.
Right. Like, it seems like it wasn't. Well, possibly the previous vintages could have been the same problem, because I think they actually looked at it. Doesn't really say exactly, but it could have been possibly previous vintages as well. Now, according to Vincent, this is this. Well, actually, not according to Vincent. The article says the judge that judged him is the same judge as that was judging in that previous case, and that does seem a little fishy to me. Is that judge already handed down a pretty harsh sentence for somebody who was adjacent to another potential fraud. He sentenced him to 18 months in prison, but it was suspended. And now, according to Vincent, though, he says, "I was not judged." This is a quote: "I was not judged impartially." And I'll read the whole sentence here. So Vincent moved to U.S. 5 years ago, quote unquote, or quote, "not to flee but to rebuild," end quote. He claims, and was not present in court last week. That's when this was finally judged. Still, he felt his prior brush with this particular judge. That's my editorial. This particular judge and prosecutors influenced the case. Quote, "I was not judged impartially," end quote, he told Wine Spectator. His defense lawyer, Eric Grosselet, called the conviction and sentence, quote, "excessively astonishing and quite incomprehensible," end quote, and indicated that his client would appeal. So it is very high. To me, this seems very high. But then again, I don't really know precedents. But 6 months in jail seems insane to me.
Well, so let's think of it this way. I'm a libertarian judge or an anarchist judge. You're brought before the docket for me for drunk driving 13 times.
Mm-hmm.
You come before me the 14th time. Like, to me, like, the idea of impartiality is just is fraudulent, and that's what I think with you know, kind of like in Lysander Spinner's Constitution of No Treason, or
Constitution of No Authority.
Yeah, like, impartiality is not a thing. No
Right.
one's impartial. Everybody's bringing something to the table. And if I have, like, you came to me before, I put you on an 18-month suspended sentence for other fraud claims.
Mm-hmm.
You're brought back. Say the evidence is overwhelming. Now I'm not impartial. Like, you committed fraud before, and clearly my 18-month suspended sentence wasn't enough. So now I'm giving you a 6-month actual sentence.
Yeah. Well,
now,
see, I'm still going to have a problem with it, because I just don't think a prison sentence is a good thing. Like, the fines are fine. The fines, like,
no. So
they do seem to be high, but I don't know.
Restitution,
yeah,
is what I'm actually for.
Right.
What I'm saying is, in, like, the context of this, of a judging.
Right. Okay.
Because, like, this offense I normally charge $10,000 worth of restitution.
Right.
This is the 17th time I've seen you commit this offense. I'm charging you $2.2 million.
Right.
So there's a certain point where there's, punitive damage, where it's like you're trying to punish the person by fining them. And then there's like making up for lost income.
Right.
And so, that's another conversation for Libertarian Justice podcast that I just made up. Like, is there an idea of punitive damages in a libertarian system? It's like, okay, I'm trying to make you whole, but like there's also like the idea of can punishment be used to actually deter further crime?
Okay.
And especially from if you one of the things is like, oh, he's a hanging judge. It's kind of like the one that they're trying to bring Assange against.
Right.
Because they're pretty sure that guy's just going to railroad him.
Right.
So, a lot of the libertarians should be focusing their efforts on getting this guy disbarred and impeached, because he's committed several offenses. Like, from my understanding is, he's not. It's not like he's just taking the law that may be unconstitutional and applying it. I think he's like going above and beyond his authority and doing all this sort of crazy other stuff as a judge.
Yeah.
So like there's a case to like get him actually disbarred, so that way that even when they finally could get Assange to trial, it's like, no, you're not getting your judge.
Right. What was it? So, you remember that episode of King of the Hill when like somebody tried to steal Hank's truck and they went before like that crazy judge who hands down the crazy sentences, and he's like, if you like stealing trucks so much, I sentence you to spend 6 months in a truck.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Like those kind of like weird.
Yeah. Where
sentences.
It's like,
there's like
these sentences, like, can they actually do that authority?
Right.
And that's kind of the question, because, it's, to me, it's incomprehensible that the court can, like, and this is one of those, what it's confusing is like, did the Chinese complain? Where the Chinese, like, I understand, like, if you and I have a contract and I represent Jacob Company, and I'm out there running around buck naked, at St. Patrick's Day, and it's not Jacob Company is the party planning service, and it's like, look how much fun we're having.
Right.
Like I could damage their reputation and then therefore lose my ability to represent Jacob Company.
Right.
But it's not like the appellation is just saying, no, you're not allowed to sell our wine anymore, and no one in our appellation is going to sell to you, and if they do, we're going to disbar them from the appellation. They can still produce wine, but they can't say it's from appellation Awesome Town.
Yeah, and this does seem like, just reading the article, it seems like this is much more of kind of like government protectionism of the appellation. When the appellation, all of them have trade associations, I feel like they could kind of fix this on their own without law enforcement in general. I mean, you and I are already of this opinion, is that like they don't need the government to come and like enforce appellations. But you could trademark Bordeaux. You could set up, well, and actually you and I have had a disagreement on this too, because I have a different opinion of trademark than you do, I think. And
yes, I think so.
But I think that they could rightfully in a anarchist society trademark the name Bordeaux or some sort of symbol of Bordeaux or something like that, and come up with some sort of trade alliance or something like that between the vintners and winemakers in that area, negotiants, and figure out how to basically sell certification of it being a official Bordeaux wine or whatever, without like a judge coming down and being like, you messed up, so now we're throwing you in a cage for 6 months. And now maybe French cages are nicer than American cages, I don't know, but all I do know is that everything I know about French prisons, I learned from that movie Papillon, and I'm pretty sure that's where they want to send him, and it's very scary to me.
Well, if you remember, and you may not, the last use of the guillotine was in the 1970s.
That's right.
At a French penal colony.
Yeah.
And I think Christopher Lee, or like somebody famous, witnessed it.
Really? Okay,
yeah,
that's interesting.
I think it was like Christopher Lee. But I don't remember for sure. But yeah, so like to me, like it's incomprehensible that you would jail someone over this. But it's also like like recently it came out that the de Blasio is
oh yeah, we're going to enforce the permanent limitations on the number of Uber drivers and Lyft drivers and that sort of thing in New York City. And it's like, okay, right. So the medallion system that the city used to be able to sell medallions for like millions of dollars or some other exorbitant amount of money, they don't have anymore because, just basically you drove for Lyft. Like, yeah, it took a little bit, but it was not $1 million for a medallion. But here's the government who created a monopoly that's based on tradition that used to be based on guilds, which may or may not have had a more nefarious background. Sure. Now we're enforcing it through the long arm of the law. So, you and I are in complete agreement in this, where it's the government enforcing the government's monopoly on the government designation. Now, like from an idea like the trade association railroading somebody, blah, 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 there are ways you can extrapolate that, like, from a communist, weirdo leftist progressive, like, oh, the state, blah, 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 like putting their thumbprint down on people, like, through big business and stuff. But, like, to me, it's the same thing, because it's the government's basically enforcing its right to enforce a monopoly that they licensed to someone else. Like, we gave you the right to be the monopoly, and now somebody's told us this guy's misbehaved, so we've got to mess him up.
Right. Yeah, that seems like what it is to me. And I think that's probably a good place to end. You and I should get into some of these other things at some point, because I bet you there are some in the wine world trademark disputes, and then we can kind of go through our own opinions on those. But I think that's it for tonight, because I had several listeners complain that we ran way too long last time.
They didn't have to listen to the whole thing.
That's true. They didn't. But they didn't complain exactly. They were just like, how do you guys record for that long? And I'm like, well, I don't know. We just got to talking. We were good friends.
I was going to say, we're best friends.
Yeah,
Easy. Yeah. So, tastinganarchy.com, Tasting Anarchy on Twitter, where if you want to see Jacob's exploits. Tasting Anarchy Childerberg for the hopefully annual event in Texas, where we will be enjoying liberty. The next one is going to be rapping on the LNC, Libertarian National Convention's door. So we will hopefully be able to see many people that we wanted to see this year but weren't able to, some of which in our hearts and minds, if what we understand is going on. Those like Mark Clare, who just couldn't do it because Porkfest was apparently so much more important that he attend. We'll hopefully get to meet him in person. I'm sure there's going to be many, many big podcasters there. Hopefully we'll have enough noise going on in the background at the time that some of them will just wander out on their own. Here's looking at you, people like Jason Stapleton and Bob Murphy. We'll drive out to see Top. Now, I'm sure we would drive out to see either of those three. It'd be great to meet any of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
tastinganarchy@gmail.com. Now, I believe, Jacob, is there 8 koozies left at this point for rating and reviewing and sending us some screenshots at tastinganarchy@gmail.com?
I think that's accurate. So I think there's I could probably squeeze some more than 8. So if you guys want to, if you think you might not make it, there's plenty of room left. I've got the ones that I set aside for this. I do have some more, but some of them are spoken to. So let's go ahead and say that we've got 10 left. Because I think I said 20 on my mini episode.
I thought I hadn't had a chance to listen to the mini, so I thought you said 10 on the other one. But okay.
I think I said 10, and then I said on the mini, I think I said 20, and then I was like, I've got enough left that I could do more than that, but I don't want to keep giving them out all year long, and it also costs me money to ship them. So let's go ahead and say we've got 10 left. And so if you rate and review it on whatever podcatcher you listen to it, go ahead and take a screenshot of it, email it to us at tastinganarchy@gmail.com, and I will get it out in the mail to you as soon as I can.
And this is a Childerberg 1 limited edition koozie.
That's right. Once they're gone, they're gone. I'm not making new ones of these. There will be Childerberg Dose koozies, but they're going to be completely different.
And they're going to cost you money. No. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. I think that's it. So from me, stay free.
Stay free.
Drinking half gallons and calling for more. Drinking wine, for you to drink wine. Wine, for you to drink wine. Wine, for you to drink wine. Pass that bottle to me. Hoy! Drink at me. Oh, give me some of that slop. Oh, pass that bottle to me. If you want to get along in Peterstown, buy some wine and pass it around. Age runs up to 49. All them cats, they love sweet wine. Drinking wine, sporty, you to drink wine. Wine, sporty, you to drink wine. Wine, sporty, you to drink wine. Pass that bottle to me. Hoy! Wine, wine, wine. Elderberry. Wine, wine, wine. Cherry, cherry. Wine, wine, wine. Blackberry. Wine, wine, wine. Port and sherry. Wine, wine, wine. Oh, pass that bottle to me. Now down on Gill Street at Willie's Den, he wasn't selling but American gin. One soldier wanted a bottle of wine. He hipped that cat for $1 and a dime. Drinking wine, sporty, you to drink wine. Wine, sporty, you to drink wine. Wine, sporty, you to drink wine. Pass that bottle to me. Now I got a nickel, have you got a dime? Let's get together and get some wine. Some buys fifth and some buys fourth. When you get together, you're doing things smart. Drinking wine, sporty, you to drink wine. Wine, sporty, you to drink wine.